This is my house. You live by my rules. You do what I say. You're not my father. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss this powerful story. Let's dive in. The kitchen light buzzed overhead, flickering every few seconds like it couldn't decide whether to stay alive or give up. The smell of overcooked meatloaf lingered in the air, mixed with the sharp tang of cleaning chemicals. Micah sat at the table, back straight, jaw clenched. Across from him, Brian, the man his mother called husband, carved his food with mechanical precision. Every scrape of the knife against the plate made Micah flinch, though he tried not to show it. How many times I gotta tell you to take the damn trash out before I get home? Brian's voice was deep, tired, and always a little angry. Micah didn't answer. Brian set down his fork. You hear me? I forgot, Micah muttered. I forgot ain't good enough. Brian leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. His muscles stretched the sleeves of his gray t-shirt. You live under my roof. You eat my food. You sleep in a room I paid for. You want to act like a grown man, but you can't remember to take out trash? Micah's mother, Rachel, sat between them, silent, staring down at her plate. He said he forgot. Brian, she said softly, not looking up. Brian turned his glare on her. You making excuses now? Rachel didn't respond. Micah pushed his food around with a fork he hadn't touched. Brian shook his head. Ungrateful. Later that night, Micah lay on his bed, staring at the cracked ceiling. The small bedroom smelled like dust and laundry detergent. Posters of basketball players lined the walls, but they didn't feel like they belonged to him anymore. He could hear them arguing in the next room. He's a teenager, Brian. You can't keep talking to him like that. You baby him, Rachel. That's why he's soft. He's not soft. He's scared. Well, maybe you should be. Micah closed his eyes. The next morning, the air was cold and wet. Rain tapped against the windows as he pulled on a hoodie and grabbed his backpack. He moved quietly through the kitchen. Brian was already gone, the only relief of the day. Rachel was at the sink, pouring coffee into a cracked mug. You got lunch money? She asked, not turning around. I'm good. She hesitated. Micah, about last night. He didn't wait. I know. He's stressed. I forgot the trash. It's my fault. Her shoulders sagged. She turned, eyes tired and puffy. That's not what I was gonna say. He kissed her cheek quickly and left before she could finish. At school, things weren't much better. Micah wasn't popular, but he wasn't invisible either. He kept his head up most of the time, earbuds in, hoping people would take the hint. Some days it worked. Today, it didn't. Yo, Micah, a voice called behind him as he walked into the cafeteria. It was Greg, tall, white, the kind of kid teachers gave second chances to. You coming to practice today? I got stuff to do. Again. Greg frowned. Man, you've been skipping out for like 2 weeks. Micah shrugged. I'm just tired. Greg rolled his eyes. You better not lose your spot. Coach ain't gonna wait forever. Micah didn't answer. He found an empty table in the back and sat alone. That evening, when Brian got home, the air changed. Micah was on the couch doing homework when the door slammed. Rachel greeted Brian with a smile he didn't return. He dropped his keys loudly on the counter, kicked off his boots. Micah didn't move. Brian walked over, standing above him. You cleaned the garage like I asked? Micah shook his head. I had homework. You had time. What did I tell you about doing what I asked the first time? Micah stood up, trying not to shake. You ask like you're giving orders. Brian's eyes narrowed. I give orders because I pay the bills. You're not my dad, Micah said suddenly. The room went still. Brian stepped closer. What did you just say? Micah's voice wavered, but he didn't look away. I said you're not my dad. Brian's fist clenched. His jaw tightened. Rachel stepped between them. Brian, stop. Please. Brian pointed at Micah. You ever say that again, I swear to God Or what? Micah asked, voice louder than he intended. Brian lunged forward, but Rachel pushed him back. Stop. He's just a kid. Brian stormed out of the house, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. Micah stood in the living room, chest heaving, eyes burning. Rachel didn't say anything. She just stared at him like she didn't recognize him anymore. That night, Micah packed a bag. He didn't know where he'd go, but he knew he couldn't stay. The street was quiet, soaked in leftover rain. A few porch lights flickered on, casting orange glows over the cracked sidewalks. Micah's hoodie was pulled up tight over his head, his backpack slung across one shoulder, the zipper half broken from overuse. He didn't know where he was going. Not really. Just away. Away from Brian's voice. away from the weight in his chest, away from a house that never felt like home. His phone buzzed, one text. Mom, where are you? Please come back. I'll talk to him. I promise. He read it twice, thumb hovering over the reply. Then he turned the phone off. He walked for almost an hour, past gas stations with flickering signs, past liquor stores and shut-down diners, past people who didn't look twice. Eventually, he reached a small park near his old elementary school, the one he barely remembered. He found a bench under a tree and dropped onto it, water soaking through his jeans. His stomach growled. He had $17 in his pocket. A pair of kids passed on scooters. A man walked a dog. A woman sat in her car at the curb, staring into her phone with the same tired look Micah had seen in his mother's eyes for years. He closed his own eyes and leaned back, trying to imagine somewhere else. Anywhere but here. He fell asleep for a little while. Woke up shivering. His neck ached. His legs were stiff. The street was emptier now. The wind had picked up, carrying that late spring cold that bites through cheap sweatshirts. He pulled his backpack closer to his chest like it could keep him warm. A cop car rolled slowly past the street corner. Micah held his breath. They didn't stop. By 10 p.m., he was desperate. He remembered Jamal, a kid from school who lived in a cramped apartment with his grandma. They weren't close, but once Jamal had said, "If you ever need a spot to chill, my place ain't fancy, but it's got heat." Micah found a 24-hour store with public Wi-Fi and sat outside on the curb, turning his phone back on. It lit up instantly. 10 missed calls. 4 voicemails. A dozen texts from his mom. "Micah, please. He's sorry. Just come home. I'll sleep on the couch if you want. Please." He ignored them all and texted Jamal. "Yo, you up?" A few minutes later. "Yeah, what's up? Can I crash at yours for the night?" Long story. Another pause. "Ask my grandma. Hang tight." 5 minutes passed. "She says okay, but just for tonight. Thank you." Micah arrived at Jamal's building around 10:45. The place smelled like weed, burnt food, and bleach. The elevator didn't work, so he climbed 4 flights of sticky stairs. Jamal answered the door in socks and a hoodie, rubbing his eyes. "Damn, you look like you just survived a war." "Feels like it," Micah muttered. Inside, the apartment was warm. Crowded, but warm. Jamal's grandma was sitting in the kitchen, nodding silently, a mug of tea in her hands. She looked him up and down but didn't ask questions. "You eat?" she asked. Micah shook his head. She pointed at the microwave. "Plate in there. Heat it up. Then sleep. No nonsense." That night, Micah lay on a thin mattress next to Jamal's bed, wrapped in an old quilt that smelled like cinnamon and cigarettes. "I ever told you," Jamal whispered, "I don't even got a dad?" Micah blinked in the dark. "No." "Yeah. Dude left before I was born. Grandma raised me. Sometimes I think it's better that way. No one around to mess you up." Micah didn't answer, but his chest tightened. Jamal added, "You good to talk, or you just need sleep?" "Sleep," Micah said quietly. But sleep didn't come easy. The next morning, Micah thanked Jamal's grandma 3 times. She didn't smile, but she nodded and handed him a Tupperware of leftovers. "Don't let pride starve you," she said. He left by 7:30, before Brian or his mother could track him. At school, no one said anything. Not the teachers. Not the security guard who always eyed him too long. Not even Greg. But at lunch, Micah sat outside and finally called his mom. She picked up on the first ring. "Micah." "I'm okay," he said. "Oh my God, baby. I'm not coming back. Not yet." Silence. "I'm staying with someone. I just need time." She didn't argue. She just said, "Okay. Just tell me where you are. Please. I'm safe." "That's not what I asked." He sighed. "You'll try to bring me back. He'll still be there. I can make him leave. You always say that. I mean it this time." He didn't respond. Then he hung up. Micah spent the next 3 nights on Jamal's floor. It wasn't comfortable. The mattress sagged in the middle, and every morning his back hurt like he was twice his age, but it was quiet. Warm. Safe. That was more than he could say about home. He didn't ask for much. He barely talked. Jamal didn't press him. But on the 4th morning, Jamal's grandma knocked gently on the bedroom door. She wasn't smiling. "Micah," she said softly, "your mom's downstairs." His heart dropped. "How?" "Probably guessed," she said. "Or maybe that boy Greg talked. Either way, she's here. She wants to see you." Micah hesitated. "Did you tell her to leave?" "I told her she had 5 minutes." Then she looked him straight in the eyes. "But I ain't gonna lock the door if you want to talk." Rachel stood outside the building, hugging herself in the morning chill. Her hair was pulled back, no makeup, eyes swollen from crying. She looked smaller than Micah remembered. Or maybe he was just growing up faster than she could hold on to. "Micah," she said when she saw him, her voice cracking. He stayed on the top step, arms crossed. "I'm not coming back," he said flatly. "I know," she replied. "I'm not here to drag you anywhere." That caught him off guard. "I just needed to see your face," she added. "To know you're safe." Micah didn't say anything. Rachel took a shaky breath. "Brian moved out. I told him to. After that night, after what you said." Micah's eyes narrowed. "You mean it this time?" She nodded, a tear rolling down her cheek. "He's gone. I should have done it sooner. You always say that." "I know." Silence stretched between them like an invisible wall. Neither wanted to be the one to climb it first. Finally, Rachel spoke again. "You don't have to come back right away. But I wanted you to know you can, when you're ready. It's your home, too." Micah shook his head. "It doesn't feel like home anymore." Rachel winced like he'd slapped her. Then she turned away, wiping her face. "I'll wait," she said. "As long as it takes." And she walked off. That night, Micah couldn't sleep again. Jamal was out cold, snoring softly. The apartment buzzed with the sound of late-night TV from the next room and distant sirens from the street below. Micah stared at the ceiling, remembering Brian's voice. "You live under my roof. You do what I say." But it wasn't his roof anymore. And Micah wasn't a scared little boy anymore. The next day at school, something strange happened. After third period, Greg caught up with him in the hall. "Yo, you good?" Micah gave him a look. "Why?" "Heard some stuff. Just checking." Micah hesitated. "I'm fine. You coming back to practice, or what?" Micah shrugged. "Don't know." Greg nodded. "Well, if you do, Coach says your spot's still open." Micah nodded. "Thanks." They stood there awkwardly for a second before Greg walked off. Micah didn't follow. By the weekend, Jamal's grandma pulled him aside. "I love you, baby," she said. "But I got bills. I got rules. And you got a mom who's trying." Micah looked down. She kicked him out. "That don't fix everything, but it's a start. I don't trust it." She put a hand on his shoulder. "Then don't trust words. Trust actions. Go see for yourself." Micah stood outside the old house the next day. Same mailbox with the dent. Same cracked walkway. Same blinds half falling off in the front window. But something felt different. He knocked. Rachel opened the door immediately. She looked exhausted, but softer, calmer. She stepped aside. "You can just look around. You don't have to stay." Micah entered slowly. Brian's boots were gone from the doorway. His beer bottles, usually lined up by the sink, were gone too. The house smelled like lemons and soap instead of cheap cologne. Micah walked into his room. It looked untouched, except for the note taped to his pillow. "I'm sorry, Mom." That night, he didn't stay. But he took his backpack, changed into fresh clothes, and took the leftovers she packed him without arguing. 3 days later, he moved back in. Not because he forgave, but because he was tired of running. Micah stood in the doorway of his bedroom, staring at the same 4 walls that had once felt like a cage. Nothing had changed physically. Same faded posters. Same chip dresser. Same creaky bed that groaned when he sat down. But the air felt different, lighter, as if something had been exorcised, or maybe just removed. Rachel stood in the hallway, arms crossed, hesitant. "You don't have to unpack," she said. "You can just stay a few nights. No pressure." Micah nodded, not looking at her. "Do you want to talk?" she asked. "No." "Okay." She didn't press. And that, more than anything, told him maybe, just maybe, she meant it this time. Dinner was quiet. No loud chewing. No knives slamming against plates. No watching the clock, waiting for the sound of boots stomping through the front door. Rachel made pasta. It wasn't great. Too much garlic, not enough salt. But Micah ate 3 servings without complaining. "Want more?" she asked. He shook his head. "I'm good." She smiled, and something in her eyes shimmered. Maybe relief, maybe sadness, maybe both. Over the next few days, they moved around each other like strangers in a museum, careful not to touch anything too delicate. Rachel worked late shifts again, like she had before Brian. Micah kept his head down at school. Came home. Ate. Slept. Repeat. He didn't ask questions. She didn't tell stories. They were just 2 people trying not to break the new silence they'd built. Then, one Thursday, Micah found something taped to the fridge. It wasn't a chore list. It was a calendar. with a big red circle around a day 2 weeks away. Family court hearing. Final protective order. His chest tightened. He stared at it for a long time. Rachel came into the kitchen and froze when she saw him. "I was going to tell you," she said softly. Micah looked at her. "You're going to court?" She nodded. "To make sure he stays gone." His throat felt dry. "You think he'll come back?" Rachel hesitated. "People like him, they don't like to lose control." Micah looked down. "I want to go," he said. Rachel blinked. "Are you sure?" He nodded slowly. "I want to be there." That night, Micah dreamed of footsteps in the hallway, of Brian's voice, low and angry. "You think you can take my house? My woman? My rules." Micah woke up drenched in sweat. He sat on the edge of his bed, heart pounding. Then he got up, walked to the living room, and took the bat from behind the door. He brought it back to his room and set it beside the bed, just in case. In the days leading up to the court date, Rachel became sharper. Not angry, not cold, just focused. She organized papers, made phone calls, wrote lists. Micah watched quietly. He hadn't seen her like this in a long time, not since before Brian. She was reclaiming something, maybe herself. On a quiet evening, Micah found her at the kitchen table, sorting through old documents. "Do you need help?" he asked. Rachel looked up, surprised. "You sure?" He nodded. She handed him a stack. "These are all the hospital records. I want to show the bruises." Micah's hand froze over one of the papers. His name, age 13, emergency room. He remembered that night. Brian said he'd tripped over the dog. There had never been a dog. Rachel looked at him. "As well." "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for not stopping it sooner." Micah swallowed hard. "I used to hate you for staying," he said quietly. "I hated myself too." They didn't say anything else. But the silence wasn't heavy anymore. The day of the court hearing, it rained. Of course it did. Micah wore a button-up shirt and shoes that pinched his toes. Rachel wore black slacks and a blue blouse, hair pulled tight. She looked like someone who was ready to be taken seriously. The courtroom was small, gray, cold. Micah spotted Brian across the room, sitting casually in a wrinkled shirt, arms draped over the bench like he owned the place. Their eyes met. Micah didn't flinch. The hearing lasted under 20 minutes. Rachel spoke clearly, showed her papers, described the bruises, the threats, the fear. Brian didn't say much. He rolled his eyes, snorted once. The judge barely acknowledged him. In the end, the order was granted. Permanent. Final. Brian wasn't allowed within 300 feet of the house, the school, or either of them. Micah let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. When they left the courtroom, Rachel held the door open for him. Micah stepped outside and looked up at the gray sky. Still raining, but he didn't feel cold anymore. After court, life didn't magically get better. It just settled. The house felt safer, but silence still lived in the corners. Micah returned to a routine. Wake up. School. Homework. Dinner. Sleep. Repeat. Rachel worked more hours to make ends meet. The bills didn't stop just because Brian was gone. If anything, they grew louder. Unpaid balances, missing payments, a warning notice on the door one afternoon. Micah saw it before she did. He pulled it down, folded it into his backpack. He didn't say anything. Neither did she. At school, things were quieter too. No fights. No warnings. Teachers stopped side-eyeing him like he might explode. A counselor called him in once, asked gentle questions with soft eyes. "Are you safe at home now, Micah?" He nodded. "Are you sleeping? Eating?" He shrugged. She didn't press. "I'm here if you need anything," she said. "Even just to talk." He said thank you, then didn't go back. Jamal noticed first. "You walk different now," he said one day at lunch. Micah raised an eyebrow. "The hell does that mean?" "You used to walk like you were waiting to get it." Micah paused. He looked down at his food, then gave a soft laugh, not the kind you hear in comedies, but the kind that escapes when you don't know what else to do. "I guess," he said. "I guess I'm not waiting anymore." One night, Micah came home and found Rachel crying at the kitchen table. It wasn't loud. It was the kind of crying people do when they've learned how to cry without making sound, the practiced grief of someone who doesn't want to burden anyone else. She quickly wiped her eyes when he walked in. "Sorry," she whispered. "Just tired." Micah opened the fridge. Almost empty. He closed it and sat across from her. "I can get a job," he said. She looked up, startled. "You don't need to." "I want to," he said. "Weekends. After school. Doesn't matter." She looked at him for a long time. Then she nodded, and her eyes filled again, but not with sadness this time. Okay, she said. If that's what you want. Micah found work at a local grocery store. Nothing fancy, bagging, stacking, cleaning. Minimum wage. Long hours. Annoying customers. But he liked it more than he thought he would. It kept his hands busy, his mind distracted. And when he handed Rachel his first paycheck, she tried not to cry again. She failed. He didn't say anything. He just hugged her. They still didn't talk much about before. Some things remained buried, like old bones under the floorboards. But one night, while watching TV in silence, Rachel asked, "Do you ever miss him?" Micah blinked. What? Brian. He thought about it. The way Brian used to let him watch football when he first moved in. The way he once fixed Micah's bike. The way Rachel used to smile before. Then he thought about the bruises. The slammed doors. The fist against the wall inches from his face. No, he said finally. I don't. Rachel nodded. Me neither. A month later, Micah got an envelope from school. Inside was a certificate. Most improved student, 10th grade. He almost laughed. It felt ridiculous, like being handed a trophy for surviving a storm you never asked to be in. He showed Rachel. She put it on the fridge with a magnet that said, "You got this." Micah stared at it for a long time, then smiled, just a little. One Saturday, while he was walking home from work, Micah saw a familiar truck parked down the street. Brian's truck. His throat clenched. His hands went cold. The court order had said 300 feet. This was way closer. He ducked behind a parked car and watched. The truck didn't move. A minute passed. Then two. Then Brian stepped out. He looked around, confused, maybe lost. Then he opened the mailbox of a house 3 doors down. Different house. Different people. Not there for them. Micah stayed hidden until Brian drove off. He ran the rest of the way home. When he got inside, he locked the door. Rachel looked up from the couch. You okay? He nodded. But that night, he slept with the bat beside his bed again. Just in case. Micah had started to laugh again. Not often, and never loudly, but Jamal noticed it one afternoon after school. They were walking home from the store, bags in hand, complaining about how overpriced chips had gotten. Micah said something under his breath about inflation being a scam, and Jamal cracked up. Then Micah did too. It wasn't much, but it was real. Damn, Jamal said, still chuckling. I missed that. I forgot your face even did that. Micah gave him a look. Did what? Smile. Micah rolled his eyes, but didn't stop smiling. Still, healing wasn't linear. Some days were fine. Other days, not so much. It would hit out of nowhere, a sound too loud, a voice too sharp, a shadow too sudden. One evening at work, a customer yelled at him for double bagging their groceries. Just raised his voice and barked, "Are you stupid?" Micah froze. Just froze. Couldn't speak. Couldn't move. The manager had to step in. The customer stormed off. Later, in the break room, Micah sat on a plastic chair with his head in his hands, shaking. His manager, a soft-spoken woman named Tanya, came in slowly. You good? He nodded. You sure? Another nod. She sat beside him. My ex used to yell like that, she said. Took me a long time to stop jumping every time someone raised their voice. Still happens sometimes. Micah glanced at her. How long did it take? She smiled gently. Still counting. At home, Rachel noticed too. Micah was quieter again. Didn't play music anymore. Didn't eat much. One night, she knocked on his door. Can I come in? He was sitting on the edge of his bed, hoodie on, headphones in, not even listening to music. Just silence. Yeah. She sat down beside him. I saw you today, she said. In the kitchen. You dropped a glass, and you didn't even flinch. He frowned. Okay. Before, you always jumped. You looked scared all the time. He didn't respond. I think you're getting stronger, she said softly. Even if it doesn't feel like it. Micah looked down at his hands. I still feel broken. She reached over and squeezed one gently. Maybe, she said. But you're not shattered. At school, things shifted again. Micah's English teacher, Mr. Larson, pulled him aside after class. Hey, your last essay was different. Micah tensed. Bad? No, Mr. Larson said quickly. Not bad. Just real. You wrote about the feeling of being watched in your own house. The way silence can feel louder than yelling. It hit hard. Micah shrugged. I didn't know what else to write. I'm glad you wrote it, Larson said. You ever think about joining the creative writing club? Micah stared at him like he'd grown another head. Seriously. Seriously, Larson said. You've got a voice, kid. People need to hear it. Micah didn't say yes. But he didn't say no either. That weekend, Rachel surprised him. She bought a second-hand desk and put it in his room. "You always do homework at the kitchen table," she said. "Figured you might want your own space." Micah stared at it. Worn edges. A few scratches. But solid. His own space. He didn't have words. Instead, he unpacked his books and lined them up carefully. Put his favorite pen in the top drawer. Taped a note to the inside that said, "You're not him." Just in case he forgot. Micah wrote more after that. At night. On breaks. On the back of receipts and in the margins of notebooks. Little pieces of himself he never said out loud. He never showed anyone. But it helped. Then, one afternoon, a police car parked outside their house. Micah looked out the window and froze. Not moving. Not breathing. Rachel came into the room, saw him at the window. "What's wrong?" "Cop," he whispered. "Outside." She looked. The officer was just walking up to a neighbor's house, chatting casual. Nothing to do with them. Rachel touched Micah's shoulder. "He's not here for us." Micah nodded slowly. But that night, he double-locked the door. Just in case. One Sunday morning, Micah woke up before the sun. The house was still, no TV, no clatter from the kitchen, no sound of feet on the old wooden floors. Just the slow hum of the fridge and the ticking of the cheap clock in the hallway. He stared at the ceiling for a while, then got up, threw on a hoodie, and went for a walk. The streets were empty. The sky a dusty blue. Birds hadn't started singing yet. Micah walked past the old corner store, the alley where he once hid from Brian's truck, the bench where he'd spent a night when he first ran away. Each place whispered something. He didn't stop. He kept walking until he reached the park near his elementary school. Same rusted swings. Same broken fountain. He sat on the bench. And for the first time in a long time, he let himself cry. The tears weren't loud or messy. They didn't come with screams or sobs. They were slow, tired. Like his body had been holding them back for so long it forgot how to release them. He cried for his mother. For himself. For all the nights he'd clenched his fists and stayed silent. For the bruises. For the apologies that never came. For the fear that still lived in his bones. When he finally wiped his face, the sky had lightened. A jogger passed, headphones in. Someone walked their dog on the opposite path. Life went on. It always did. Micah didn't tell anyone about that morning. But something shifted after it. He started writing more seriously. Filled a notebook with short stories, poems, memories disguised as metaphors. He never titled them. He didn't need to. His English teacher noticed. "You've got something raw, Micah," Mr. Larson said one afternoon. "You don't hide. That's rare." Micah shrugged. "I don't really know what I'm doing." "That's the best kind of writer," Larson smiled. Then he handed him a flyer. "Youth Writing Contest, theme, what home means to me." Deadline, 2 weeks. Micah read it twice. "Home," he repeated quietly. Larson raised an eyebrow. "You got something to say on that?" Micah looked down at his hands. "Maybe." That night, he stared at the flyer for an hour. Then he opened his notebook and wrote 4 words at the top of the page. Home doesn't mean safety. The next few days, Micah poured himself into it. He wrote during lunch. At work. On receipts. In bed with a flashlight under the covers. Words spilled faster than he could control them, sharp, honest, ugly, true. He didn't care if he won. He just needed it out. By the time he finished, it wasn't just a story. It was his story. And he wasn't afraid of it anymore. A week later, Rachel found the draft on the desk. Micah walked in just as she was reading the last lines. He froze. "You weren't supposed to it." She looked up, eyes full. "You wrote this." He nodded. "I didn't know," she said softly, voice trembling. "I didn't know you remembered it all so clearly. I never forgot." She reached for his hand. "I'm proud of you," she said. "No matter what happens with the contest." Micah didn't say anything, but her words stayed with him longer than any trophy ever could. The day the results came in, Micah didn't check the email. He went for another walk. This time in daylight. This time, he wasn't running from anything. When he got back, Rachel was in the kitchen. She smiled before he even said anything. "You won." Micah blinked. "Wait, what?" "The contest. You won." He stood there, stunned. "They want to publish it," she added. "In a local youth anthology. And they're inviting you to read it next month at the community center." Micah sat down slowly. He hadn't thought about anyone hearing it. He hadn't thought about saying it out loud. His chest tightened. "I don't know if I can do that." Rachel nodded. "You don't have to. But if you do, I'll be there." That night, Micah stood in front of the mirror and read the story out loud. He hated his voice at first. It cracked. It stumbled. He skipped words. But the second time, it was steadier. The third time, stronger. By the fifth, it felt like his voice. Not Brian's. Not Fear's. His. The community center was packed. Not just with folding chairs and sticky juice cups, but with something else Micah couldn't name. A kind of quiet energy. Anticipation mixed with nerves. He sat near the back at first, hood up, notebook clutched in his hands like it was armor. Rachel sat beside him, calm but alert, like a bodyguard with a mother's heart. "You don't have to go up if you change your mind," she whispered. Micah shook his head. "I want to." He did. But his stomach didn't believe him. They called the other winners first, a girl who wrote a story about her grandmother, a boy who performed a rap about eviction. The crowd clapped after every piece. Micah's name was last. He stood slowly, walked to the front like the floor might fall out beneath him. When he reached the microphone, he looked down at the page in his hands, the same one he'd rewritten 5 times. The one Rachel had cried over. The one that had, somehow, brought him back to himself. He cleared his throat and began. "My name is Micah, and this is called What Home Means to Me." His voice trembled on the first line, then steadied. He read about the sound of fists hitting walls, about hiding in closets with his breath held, about his mom's bruises and the nights she slept with her shoes on, just in case. He read about running, about sleeping on Jamal's floor, about the kindness of people who had nothing and the silence of those who had everything. He read about returning, not to forgive, but to survive. And finally, he read, "Home is not a place. It's a choice. And sometimes, it's a battle. But I choose to stay. I choose to fight for it. And I choose to heal, even if it takes the rest of my life." When he finished, there was no sound. Not at first. Then applause. Loud. Real. Not polite, but felt. Rachel stood too, clapping through her tears. Micah looked out at the crowd. No one was filming. No one was judging. They were just listening. Afterward, strangers approached him. A woman in her 40s hugged him and whispered, "I left too, once." A teenage boy nodded and said, "That was real, man." Even Jamal showed up, late and out of breath, but grinning like an idiot. "You didn't tell me you could write," he said. Micah smiled. "Guess I didn't know either." That night, Micah placed the printed copy of his story on the fridge, right under the certificate from school. Rachel took a picture of it, then of him. He let her. The days that followed were softer. Not perfect, but softer. Micah still flinched when voices got loud. He still checked behind him when walking home. But he didn't lock his door anymore. And sometimes, when the air felt right, he opened the window and let the wind come in. One evening, as he was packing his bag for work, Rachel poked her head into his room. "Got a sec?" "Sure." She sat on the edge of his bed. "I talked to a counselor at work today. She said there's a support group for teens who've gone through stuff." Micah looked at her, cautious. "I'm not saying you have to," she added. "But maybe it's time." He nodded slowly. "Maybe. Then, would you go with me? Just the first time." Rachel smiled. Of course. 2 weeks later, Micah stood in a circle with 6 other kids. A girl who used to live in a shelter. A boy whose father was in prison. Another whose mom never came home. He didn't say much that first day, but he listened. And when someone said, "I used to think I was the only one," Micah nodded. Not because he knew what they meant, but because now, finally, they knew what he meant too. Part 9, 1000. Part 9, Faces in the Mirror. The support group met every Wednesday evening in a small, nondescript room at the community center. Micah was late the first time. He almost didn't go. But Rachel's quiet encouragement, "One night won't change anything, but it might help," pushed him out the door. He walked in, heart pounding, and took a seat in the circle. The faces were different, but the stories familiar. A girl named Aaliyah talked about her father leaving and never coming back. A boy named Marcus shared how his mother struggled with addiction. They all listened when he talked about the nights hiding from Brian. The group didn't judge. They just heard. After a few weeks, Micah started opening up more. He told them about the fights, the bruises, the silence that screamed. He talked about Rachel and Jamal, about the bat beside his bed, about the moments when the world felt like it might swallow him whole, and the moments when it didn't. The group became a lifeline, a place where pain wasn't a secret. One night after group, Rachel and Micah sat outside on the bench. The air was crisp, the stars pale. "I'm proud of you," she said. Micah looked at her. "You think I'm brave?" She smiled. "You're more than brave. You survived it." Micah laughed softly. Feels more like fighting, he said. At school, things improved. Micah's teachers stopped watching him like he was a problem. He joined the creative writing club, encouraged by Mr. Larson. Jamal and some other friends started hanging out more. For the first time, Micah felt like he belonged somewhere. But healing wasn't perfect. One afternoon, while walking home, a car sped by, and someone yelled a racial slur out the window. Micah froze. The words hit deep. His heart raced. He wanted to run, but he didn't. He kept walking. That night, he wrote about it. Words pouring onto the page. Anger, fear, hope, pain. He realized that the scars, visible or not, would always be part of him. But he was no longer defined by them. He was more. Rachel watched him one evening, reading over his shoulder. You're turning pain into power, she said. Micah looked at her. Maybe one day, he said. Maybe tomorrow. The day of his reading at the community center arrived. Micah woke up early, nerves twisting his stomach into knots. He stood in front of the mirror, smoothing down his shirt, practicing his breathing. Rachel was there, quietly supportive, making sure he had everything he needed. Remember, she said, this is your story. Your voice. No one can take that away. He nodded. At the center, the room was packed again. Friends from school, the support group, neighbors, and strangers. Micah felt the weight of their eyes. He took the stage, opened his notebook, and began to read. His voice was steady this time. The words flowed clear and strong. He told them about the fear, the pain, the silence, but also about the hope, the fight, the choice to heal. Each line echoed with truth. The crowd was silent, listening, feeling, understanding. When he finished, the applause was thunderous. People stood, clapping. Rachel wiped tears from her eyes. Jamal gave a thumbs up. Micah smiled, feeling something warm and new bloom inside. Afterward, a woman approached him. She worked at a local youth center. We want to start a program for teens like you, she said. Would you help us? Micah thought about it. About how far he'd come. About the nights he wanted to give up. About the strength he found in writing his story. I'd like that, he said. Back home, the house felt different.